My name is Lauren. I used to believe that being dependable was the same as being loved, that if I showed up every time, worked harder than anyone expected, and never asked for anything in return, my family would eventually treat me like I mattered. Then my coworker texted me a photo from a party I didn't know existed. My brother laughing, glass raised, standing inside my photography studio, the one I'd spent 4 years building from nothing, surrounded by his clients and business partners, none of whom knew whose name was on the lease. They used my space, my brand, my reputation. And when I walked through my own front door that night, my brother looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Can you just act like staff for one evening? Don't make this weird." I didn't make it weird. But I did start recording. Monday morning started the way most of mine do. Alarm at 5:45. Coffee black. Inbox already waiting. I run a boutique photography and creative studio in downtown Nashville called Frame and Ground Event Photography. Brand shoots, corporate portraits, creative rentals. It took me 4 years, 2 side jobs, and 1 very bad loan to get it off the ground. The space itself is warm and industrial. Exposed brick, high ceilings, 600 square foot shooting floor, a client lounge I designed piece by piece from estate sales and weekend markets. I was going through rental inquiries that morning when I noticed a name in our event calendar that stopped me cold. Hargrove Partners Client Showcase. Saturday, 7 p.m. Full studio rental, catering coordination, premium package. My brother's last name is Hargrove. I sat there for a moment, coffee halfway to my mouth. My brother, Derek, runs a small commercial real estate consultancy. He'd been trying to close a deal with a regional investment firm for months. I knew that because he'd called me twice asking if I could loan him money for a client dinner. Both times I said I couldn't. Both times he went quiet and changed the subject. I set the mug down and opened the booking file. The reservation had been submitted through our online portal 3 weeks earlier under the name DH Consulting, listed as a returning client. I didn't recognize it. I pulled up the account and saw that the initial deposit, $400, had been paid, using a card ending in numbers I didn't recognize. The total booking cost was listed as complimentary, flagged internally as a courtesy hold. I frowned. We don't do courtesy holds. We never have. I walked to the front desk where my studio manager Priya was organizing the weekend shoot schedule. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice even, "do you know anything about a DH Consulting booking for Saturday?" Priya looked up. "Oh yeah, someone called last week saying they were your brother and that you'd approved a comp rental for a small client event. I didn't want to bother you. It was marked internal." I stared at her. "I didn't approve anything." Her expression shifted. "Lauren, I'm so sorry," he said. "Pull the call log for me, please." She did. I listened to the voicemail from a number I recognized immediately. Derek's voice, casual and confident. "Hey, this is Derek Hargrove, Lauren's brother. She said to flag this one as approved for Saturday. She'll confirm the details directly. Thanks so much." He hung up before anyone could ask a follow-up question. No email, no paper trail from me. Just his voice and the assumption that I wouldn't check. I thanked Priya and walked back to my office. I closed the door quietly. My first instinct was to call him. That old familiar pull, just fix it privately. Don't let it become a thing. But something made me pause. I thought about the 2 phone calls asking for money. The way he said just this once both times. The way he never asked how the studio was doing. Only what it could do for him. I opened my laptop instead. I pulled the booking record, the voicemail, our internal calendar, and a screenshot of the courtesy hold. I saved everything to a folder on my desktop. I named it Saturday. Then I opened a new document and typed 1 line at the top. I didn't fill anything else in. I just stared at it, let it settle. He assumed I'd say nothing. He was counting on it. By Wednesday, I'd confirmed what I suspected. Derek hadn't just booked the space. He'd been telling people about it. I found out through my second shooter, Marcus, who mentioned in passing that he'd seen Frame and Ground tagged in a LinkedIn post by someone named Garrett Wills, a commercial real estate investor based in Atlanta. The caption read, "Looking forward to an exclusive evening at one of Nashville's top creative venues courtesy of Hargrove Partners." Courtesy of Hargrove Partners. Not a rental, not a booking, a gift, presented as if it was Derek's to give. I clicked through Garrett Wills's profile. He had over 12,000 followers. The post already had 43 likes and several comments asking about the venue. One read, "Love that space. Very high-end. Another said, Derek has great taste. I put the phone face down on my desk. He wasn't just using my studio, he was using my brand. The years I'd spent building Frame and Ground's reputation, the editorial clients, the press mentions, the aesthetic I'd cultivated from the ground up, all of it was being handed to a room full of strangers as if it were his, as if he'd built something too. That night I drove past my parents' house on the way home. The lights were on. I almost pulled over, but then I remembered the last time I'd mentioned to my mother that Derek had asked me for money. She'd said, "He's just going through a hard time, Lauren. You've always been the stable one." She meant it as a compliment. She always did. But what it really meant was, "You can handle it, so we're going to keep handing things to you and calling it love." I pressed the gas and kept driving. Thursday afternoon, I got a call from a woman named Claudia, who worked for a company called Meridian South Investments. She introduced herself warmly and said she was calling to confirm a few details for Saturday's event at Frame and Ground. She said Derek had told her I would be handling the setup personally. I didn't miss a beat. "Of course," I said. "I just want to make sure I have the right information on file. Can you tell me what Derek communicated to you about the arrangement?" She was happy to fill me in. Derek had presented the evening as a private showcase hosted at his family's creative studio. He told her the space was reserved exclusively for Hargrove Partners clients. He had positioned it as a perk, something he could offer that other consultants couldn't. She seemed genuinely impressed by the whole concept. "It sounds like a wonderful space," she said. "It is," I said. "I built it." A pause. "Oh, are you the owner?" "Yes," I said. "I am." Another pause. Longer this time. I kept my voice warm, professional. "I just want to make sure everything goes smoothly for your team, Claudia. I'll be in touch before Saturday." I thanked her and ended the call. Then I sat in my car in the studio parking lot for 4 minutes without moving. He had told them it was the family studio, not Lauren's studio, not his sister's business, the family's, as if he had any stake in it, as if the years I worked weekends, skipped vacations, and maxed out a credit card to replace the HVAC unit were somehow a collective effort. I went back inside and added the call notes to the Saturday folder. On Friday evening, I texted Derek. Casual. "Hey, are you stopping by the studio tomorrow before the event? Just want to make sure setup goes smoothly." He replied within 2 minutes. "Yeah, planning to be there around 5. This is going to be huge, Elle. Really appreciate you making this work." I stared at the word appreciate. He still thought this was something I'd agreed to. I typed back. "See you then." Saturday morning I arrived at the studio at 7. I pulled every event photo from our past 2 years off the main wall and replaced them with 3 large prints. I'd taken myself my most recognized work, each one matted and labeled in the corner with my name and the Frame and Ground logo. I rearranged the client lounge. I set out our branded portfolio books on the coffee table. I made the space look exactly like what it was, my studio, built by my hands, bearing my name. Priya arrived at 8. She looked at the setup and then looked at me. "We're doing a full documentation run today," I told her. "Every vendor who comes through signs our standard intake form. Every delivery gets logged with a timestamp." She nodded without asking why. She knew. Derek arrived at 5:15 with 2 colleagues. He walked in like he owned it, which I suppose was the whole point. He was wearing a blazer I hadn't seen before, freshly pressed, confidence all the way to the door. He spotted me at the front desk, and his stride slowed just slightly. Then he recovered. "There she is," he said. "Warm, easy. The woman behind the magic." "Hey," I said simply. He lowered his voice as he got closer. "Look, I know I should have looped you in earlier, but this deal is massive, Elle. If I close Garrett tonight, it's a 6-figure commission. I needed something that would set me apart. You understand, right?" I looked at him for a moment. "Did you tell them you were the owner?" He laughed. "I said it was the family studio." "Which it kind of is. Mom and Dad helped you a little when you started, didn't they? My mother had co-signed my first lease application because my credit score was thin from the loan. She hadn't given me $1. She'd signed a form, but Derek had apparently been holding that form in his back pocket as a claim to my business for 4 years. "Go get ready for your clients," I said. He clapped me on the shoulder and moved on. By 7:30, the room had about 20 people. Derek was in the center of it, drink in hand, doing what he did best, making everyone feel like they were exactly where they wanted to be. I moved along the edges, observing. Claudia from Meridian arrived at 7:45. She found me almost immediately. "Lauren," she said, shaking my hand. "It's wonderful to finally see the space in person. Derek talks about it like it's his crown jewel. He should talk about his own work that way," I said pleasantly. "This one is mine." She tilted her head. Something shifted in her expression. A small recalibration. Of course. I didn't realize he made it sound like a shared... "A lot of things sound different depending on who's telling the story," I said, still smiling. "Can I show you around?" I gave Claudia a 15-minute tour of the studio. I explained the renovation, the equipment, the editorial history, the clients we'd worked with. I didn't say anything negative about Derek. I didn't have to. I just told the truth. By the time we got back to the main room, I watched her look at him differently. Garrett arrived at 8. Derek intercepted him at the door, and I stayed back. But Garrett was the kind of man who looked around a room before he settled into it. He took in the space, the lighting, the prints on the wall, and the logo on every surface. And then he found me. He came over and introduced himself. I introduced myself back. "This is an impressive setup," he said. "You own this outright?" "Purchased the lease 4 years ago," I said. "Built out the interior myself over about 18 months. He nodded, impressed. Derek mentioned this was a family venture. I smiled. Derek is very supportive of my work. Something moved across Garrett's face. Not anger. More like arithmetic. The kind of quiet recalculation that happens when numbers don't add up the way someone told you they would. About 40 minutes later, I watched Derek find a quiet corner with Garrett. I couldn't hear them, but I could read the body language. Derek was explaining something. Garrett was listening with his arms crossed. Derek laughed once, too loudly. Garrett did not. The event wrapped up at 10. People filtered out warmly. On the surface, it had been a lovely evening, but I'd watched the room all night and I knew what had happened under it. When everyone was gone and the catering team was clearing glasses, Derek found me in the back office. "What did you say to Garrett?" he asked. His voice was careful, practiced. "I told him I built this studio," I said. "Which is true, Lauren. And I told him you're very supportive of my work." I paused. "Which is what you always say, isn't it? That you're proud of me. That you tell everyone about the studio." He rubbed the back of his neck. "He's pulling out. Said he wants to revisit the partnership terms." I looked at him. "That's between you and Garrett. You knew exactly what you were doing tonight," he said, his voice dropping. "I knew exactly what you were doing," I replied. "You told a room full of investors that this was your asset. You used my name and my brand to close a deal without asking me, without paying, without even a conversation. I kept my voice low, steady. And you called it family." He didn't answer right away. Then, "It was one event. It was 4 years of my life," I said, "and it has my name on it, not yours." He left without helping clean up. I wasn't surprised. That night, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea I'd forgotten to drink, I opened my phone and looked at something I'd been avoiding. A group chat with my parents and Derek labeled family. I scrolled back 3 weeks. There, buried between a recipe my mom had shared and a forwarded article from my dad, was a message from Derek. "Going to use the studio Saturday for a client thing. Lauren's fine with it." My mom had replied with a heart emoji. My dad sent a thumbs up. No one had asked me. I read it twice. I wasn't in the group chat. I'd been removed at some point, or maybe I'd never been added to this particular thread. I only saw it because Derek had accidentally forwarded it to me in a separate message days later, along with a string of other texts he'd meant to send elsewhere. I screenshot it, added it to the folder. Over the following week, I heard nothing from Derek. He didn't call to apologize, didn't text, didn't acknowledge anything. My mother called on Wednesday to ask if I was coming to Sunday dinner. I said I had a shoot. She said, "Okay, honey," and moved on. Then on Thursday, Marcus sent me a link. Derek had posted on LinkedIn again. This time it was a reflection post about the importance of leveraging your network and making bold moves in business. He mentioned an exclusive client event at a premier Nashville creative space. He did not mention my name. He did not mention Frame and Ground. He had cropped the studio logo out of the single photo he used. I read the post twice. Then I picked up my phone and called Claudia. We spoke for 12 minutes. I told her what had happened calmly, factually, with dates and details. I told her Derek had not been authorized to represent the studio. I told her he had impersonated a booking agent and presented my brand as a shared family asset to attract investors. I also sent her a follow-up email with the voicemail recording from our system, the booking record, and a copy of the LLC paperwork showing I was the sole owner of Frame and Ground. I didn't ask her to do anything with it. I just said, "You deserve to have the full picture." Claudia forwarded the email to Garrett that same afternoon. I know because Garrett emailed me directly 2 days later. He said he appreciated my transparency and that he was reevaluating his options. He also asked if Frame and Ground had ever considered doing brand photography for commercial real estate firms. I replied that we had, in fact, worked with several regional developers. I attached our portfolio. We had a discovery call the following week. On Saturday morning, 11 days after the event, Derek showed up at the studio unannounced. He walked in during a quiet hour between shoots. I was alone in the back, editing. Priya let me know he was waiting. I took my time. When I came out, he was standing near the front desk, hands in his pockets. He looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before. Less polished. Garrett's firm isn't moving forward, he said. I waited. And DH Consulting lost another prospect this week. I don't know if Claudia said something or if Garrett did. But people are talking. He exhaled. I just need to know, are you going to keep going? Is this a war now? I looked at him for a long moment. It was never a war, Derek. You walked into my business, used my name, and expected me to be grateful you'd thought of me. I crossed my arms, not in anger, but to hold myself steady. I didn't launch a campaign against you. I just stopped being invisible. His jaw tightened. Mom thinks you're being vindictive. Mom didn't know I never approved the booking, I said. I showed her the group chat last week. That surprised him. A small fracture appeared in his expression. What did she say? She said she was sorry for not asking, I said. And then she said she was sorry for assuming you'd handled it properly. I paused. It wasn't a big conversation, but it was an honest one. He stood there for a moment. Something passed across his face that might have been shame if he'd let it land. I should have asked, he said finally. Yes, I said. You should have. He left. We didn't hug. I didn't watch him walk out. I turned back toward the studio and stood in the middle of the shooting floor for a moment. The light came through the high windows in long, clean angles. Dust moved slowly in it. I thought about the day I signed the lease on this place, how my hands shook when I handed over the deposit. How I sat in this empty room afterward on a folding chair I'd brought from home and told myself it was going to be enough. It was always enough. I'd just been lending it out to people who never asked if they could borrow it. That afternoon, I updated our booking system. New policy. All reservations require written approval from the owner, regardless of relationship to the business. No verbal holds. No internal courtesy flags. Priya helped me draft the language. We sent it to our vendor contacts and posted it in the studio's client portal. It wasn't punitive. It was just clear. And clear, I was learning, is its own kind of protection. 3 weeks later, I got a message from a photographer in Memphis who had found Frame and Ground through Garrett Wills's company profile. He'd listed us as a preferred creative partner on their new vendor page. The Memphis photographer wanted to know if I offered studio affiliate arrangements for regional markets. I replied the same evening. We set up a call for the following Thursday. Later that night, I sat on my apartment couch with the same cup of tea I always forgot to drink and opened my journal to a page I'd written years ago, back when the studio was still mostly a plan and a prayer. I'd written, "Build something they can't take from you." I'd done that. The problem was I'd forgotten for a while that they could also mean people who loved me. But love that treats your work like a resource, your name like a co-signature, your silence like approval that's not love. That's assumption with a familiar face. I closed the journal, walked to the window. Nashville was lit up and quiet at the same time, the way it gets late on weeknights when the honky-tonks wind down and the real city breathes again. I thought about all the times I'd made myself smaller to keep the peace. Said it's fine when it wasn't. Forgiven things that weren't followed by change. Stayed at the table long after the meal was over, because leaving felt like abandonment. I wasn't going to do that anymore. Not out of bitterness. Not out of scorekeeping. Just because I'd finally understood something that took too long to learn. Holding your ground isn't the same as holding a grudge. Protecting what you built isn't the same as shutting people out. It's just knowing where you end and where you don't. There's something I've never said out loud until now. Being the capable one in a family isn't a compliment. It's an assignment. And nobody ever asked if you wanted the job. They just handed it to you early and kept adding to the pile because you never dropped anything. For a long time, I thought not dropping things was strength. Now I think it was just conditioning. Real strength is knowing what's worth carrying and what needs to be set down and walked away from. So if you've ever built something with your own hands, your own time, your own sleepless years, and had someone treat it like it was partly theirs, just because they were there when you started, I want you to know your name on the door means something. Don't let anyone else answer it. And if you've ever stayed quiet to keep the peace stayed invisible in your own life, because it was easier than asking to be seen, I see you. This channel is for you. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had someone use your name, your work, or your reputation without asking? Or maybe you've been the person who held things together so long you forgot you were allowed to put them down? Drop where you're watching from. I read every single one. If this story meant something to you, please subscribe. More true stories are coming about the cost of silence, the price of trust, and what it looks like when you finally stop making yourself smaller to fit into someone else's narrative. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.